move on to another topic. We're going back into what keeps your Lotus going topic, and this is a really good question that Stephen, I think, came up with. And I'm sure that collectively there's a few contributions here, and maybe out of this we'll come up with a collective answer. So the question is, what are the essential or minimum tools that you should carry around in your car, in your Lotus? Now that's going to vary depending on what Lotus it is and a whole range of different things, but let's just break it down into a couple of categories, old and new, and perhaps David, David Mottram, you might want to give your recommendations. I think you'd be pretty expert at this one.
Duct tape and
certainly, thank you. Yeah. Well, I think there's two things. I mean, there is no limit to the number of tools you can have when you want to work on your cars. That's the first thing. I've been working on cars for 55 years now, and I'm still buying tools. I'm still making tools for specialist applications or to make life easier, etc. So certainly in working on cars in general, there is no limit to the number of tools you can have. A couple of guidelines, though, I think. The first thing that you need, the first tool that you need is knowledge. And knowledge only comes from experience. Experience only comes from getting your hands dirty, fundamentally. So you have to work out as an individual whereabouts you are on the spectrum. If you have absolutely zero knowledge and no great interest or facility to improve that situation, well, you're best to take it to the dealer and pay the money. If you're prepared to start with some simple things, on a modern car, older cars are much easier. Modern cars have there's less for you to do, but some of the things are perhaps a little more complicated. On a lease, for example, in an old car, you might say, I'll change the oil in the filter. Well, it's a relatively simple process. On a lease, on an Exige, 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder, your first dilemma you have, of course, is you've got to take the under tray off. How do I get the under tray on? You know, the car's only 8 inches from the ground or 200 mil from the ground, hardly enough to even slide your body under on a slide. So, you know, you've got the difficulty, you've got to get it up in the air a little bit, and there's certain difficulties with that. So, in the end, often people just go and have the oil changed by the dealer, which doesn't cost much money. Whereas in an older car, it's relatively simple. You just lean underneath, undo the plug, it runs out onto the floor, then you mop it up later. So it's very dependent upon the car that you have. I think as a couple of guidelines, I think that once you start to buy tools, you should buy the very best tools that you can afford. If you go down to Total Tools or one of these places or Bunnings or whatever, you can buy a comprehensive kit for $300, and it'll have every tool that man has ever made in this kit, and not one of them will be anybody good. They'll all be the ring spanners won't fit nicely, they'll be horrible in your hand, they will break, they'll bend, they'll round off the nuts. You don't want to go that way. You want to build up your tool kit over time by buying the best tools that you can afford, which are things like Star Wheelie or Snap-on or whatever. And yes, they are expensive, but once you've bought them and you start to use them, you will have them for a lifetime, right? That's the first thing. I guess the exception to that rule is that if you've got a job that you know that you're literally only going to do once, and well, in which case, by all means, go and buy it, like a big socket. To take the hubs off an Elise, for example, needs I think from memory, a 22 mil socket. Well, you go and you buy the nice cheap one, weld it to a big bar, and you do the job, right? And you might only have to use it once, and it goes back in the corner. That's what I mean, making a special tool. But if you're going to use them frequently, buy the best you can buy. I thought it was instructional. As many of you know, we drove our MG on the Silk Road a couple of years ago, and it's currently sitting in England waiting for us to drive back. In fact, at the moment we should be just entering Mongolia. COVID put an end to that, of course. that was a 100-day trip, and we have to look after 8 cars all that way. And yes, the cars were predominantly rebuilt, but we still had to maintain them, etc. So I had to lay out a tools set for myself, and having a good knowledge of the car, having built it, I knew exactly what spanners I would need to take. But look, all of the spanners and tools that I took, the open-ended, not open-ended, but vice grips and so on, I could have packed it all into a bag probably about that round. There wasn't actually that many tools. Obviously, we liaised with each other so that we all didn't take a torque wrench, for example. Only one person took a torque wrench. But it's surprising how few tools you need to work on a car. On a modern car, if you go and buy a decent quality small ratchet, little socket set, that'll do an awful lot of stuff. One of those plus a set of open-end / ring spanners, and you'll be able to do a lot of work on your car. Older cars, and certainly the suspension on some of the more modern cars, need a decent size drive bar. And so your little socket set, which is generally driven with a 1/4 inch square drive or a 3/8 inch square drive, often most of the jobs will be done with those, and you need the small size of those. But there'll be certain jobs where you need a 1/2 inch drive because of the nature of the job and the amount of force that has to go into it. But I'd be sticking these days to a socket set that has a 1/4 inch drive and 3/8 inch drive, and then a little adapter. And if I need to buy a single 1/2 inch drive socket for a particular job, I just go and buy that. You don't need a lot of, you honestly don't need a lot of tools. You can do a lot with a minimum amount of tools, plus a little bit of ingenuity. I don't know what else I can say, really. You will be buying tools for the rest of your life if you want to work on your own car. If you don't want to work on your own cars, well, don't buy any tools. Just pay somebody else to do it.
I went to the same school that David did. I was given a Sidchrome combination toolkit, that's everything, for my 21st birthday, and that was over half a century ago, and every piece of it is still there and in perfect condition. So I absolutely endorse, buy the best tools you can. You mentioned Star Willie, for example. There are a number of others, but broadly speaking, the cheap stuff will let you down. They will break, trust me. So
I know.
So, and what Dave says is quite right too. I mean, one of those little quarter inch drive sets that go from 8 mil to 13 mil, they will do a plethora of jobs on the car. All the little fiddly stuff. Anything that needs a 1/2 inch drive, well, that's a workshop job.
I agree. I agree with everything both of you have said. And I'd just like to just give you a little anecdote. One of the things that improved the productivity of Track Trailer 20 years ago was that we had all of the guys on the production line all had complete toolkits. And so that meant that when they needed a 12 mil socket or something, they had to, find it from amongst a whole lot of other things. And so just coming back to Colin Chapman and adding lightness, if you're actually going to carry a toolkit, there's no point in carrying the full range of a socket set or anything like that if there aren't any bolts that suit those sockets. You're just looking for the wrong one to use, if you like, when you're actually carrying them. So you can actually shrink it right down to the only spanners that fit your car, and all the rest you can leave home.
On an older Lotus, the vast majority of the nuts and bolts you can do with probably 3 spanners, 1/2 inch, 9/16 or 5/8. And you have 2 of each of those, so you've got to hold either end of the nut and the bolt, the nut and the bolt head. Modern cars, a 12, probably an 8, a 10, a 12, 13, perhaps a 15, and that would be about it. That's all you'd have to have. And if it needs more than that, we'll go and buy the individual one. And my great frustration is when I do lose a socket, it costs me almost as much to buy one socket to replace the one I've lost as it did to buy the original set. But that's the nature of commerce, really.
Very annoying also when they drop down into the under tray, and I lost lost into some nook and cranny and you can't get them out.
That's what little magnetic sticks for.
Yeah.
Ah, so there's an essential tool. That sounds like a good suggestion. Something with a magnetic end to it to be able to pull the screws, rivets, and potentially spanners out from the little nooks and crannies that they fall into.
And the one that has the torch on the magnetic end, that's a useful one too.
Is there such a one? Can you have it?
There is such a one. I've got one. Don't worry.
And a mirror on an extendable stick so you can see
Yeah, one
them.
of them too. Yep.
Oh,
I've got one that's actually got a plunger on it and a grabber on the
Oh yeah,
end.
got one of them too.
Yeah, same. They're good. They're very good.
Eddie, I think
As
Eddie's been given a thumbs up to go out and buy some tools on the weekend.
I don't need to. I've got all of those things except for the grabber. I haven't got the grabber one.
Well, there you go. You've got an excuse now.
Thank you, Richard.
yeah. Well, maybe it might help just to know what sorts of things people have experienced have failed while they're out on the road and they've found that they haven't had the right tools for. Anyone want to?
Yeah, I've got a great example of that. I put CV joints in my car and they self-imploded, and there's absolutely nothing you can do when a drive shaft goes. So my number one tool was my mobile phone. I rang David Mottram and he came and picked me up with his car and trailer and rescued me. So your mobile phone's your number one tool.
Well, as someone previously said on the chat, a credit card, an OBD reader, if you've got a more modern car, I guess that's a good one, and a credit card probably, or the right phone numbers are probably the most important things to have, aren't they?
RACV Total Care. Tow you home from anywhere. Done it that often. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, you can't fix an Esprit starter motor on the side of the road either, as I found out in our last early morning run. And that, RACV Total Care got me home. Still cost $150 because I was 25 kilometres too far outside the radius, but did the job.
You couldn't have pushed it 25 k's, Guy?
Sorry?
You couldn't have pushed it that extra 25 k's?
No, probably not.
It's surprising how many total care cases seem to be right outside various racetracks.
Yeah, good point. Hayden, did you want to tell us a bit about what you're doing with your Exige?
Oh, I just put another engine in it, putting a built motor in it. So
A bigger, faster engine?
same size, more boost.
It's Richard Cooper's engine, Vicky.
Oh, with the Bowie?
I just bought the just the engine itself, so I'll put all my ancillaries on it.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, so that should make it a fair bit more fun.
Expect to see it as a rocket zooming past us. Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully the gearbox will hold up.
Okay.
I don't know, Hayden, have you spoken to Richard about the gearbox? I don't know if he's still got it. He was
No, he sold it to some bloke over in Poland or Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
So yes, no, I've just built it. John Reese built me a gearbox start of the year, so mine should be all right for a while as long as I'm nice to it.
Yes.
So now Richard's a nice bloke, so I've had a few chats with him about it. So yeah, we've pulled the engine out, then I'll transfer everything over. Got to put oil pump gears in it tomorrow, and then probably fit it next week after. I was hoping to have it tuned on the 21st, but that's not going to happen now. So it'll be back up and running likely before I'm allowed to get it tuned.
Yeah.
So yeah, it should be a bit of fun. Try and get maybe, I don't know, 240 kilowatts at the wheels.
Good power.
That should be enough.
Should be good. So,
It's never enough. What are you talking about?
maybe not. I think we've done pretty well, but, you know, has anyone else got anything else going at the moment they'd like to share, a question you'd like to ask, or maybe just what's going on for you for lockdown at the moment?
Does anyone know if I need to lock the cam gears when I undo the crank pulley? Or is it just a matter of, because I've got to take the oil pump out, which is obviously run off the crank, or is it just a matter of setting the timing when I put it all back together?
If it's, I don't know the answer, but if it's easy to lock them, just lock them.
Yeah.
Not my area of expertise, but what engine are you dealing with, Hayden?
The 9Sept20 Toyota engine.
Okay.
So it's overhead cam gears are up the top. So you take the chain off. The cam shouldn't really move. I bought the tool. Funnily enough, I've had about 10 different tools delivered this week, from nuts for the special Toyota nuts from America for the water pump pulley, to the Toyota service tools to hold the crank and other pulleys. But yeah, once you've undone the crank pulley, the cams won't really move, because you just undo take the chain off and pull the oil pump out from there.
Yeah, I think with a lot of modern engines, they have two methods of making sure everything's aligned. One, they put a peg into the flywheel so it doesn't rotate, and they put a locker on the overhead cam so that they don't get out of sync. And then you're supposed to set it all up, and it's easy peasy, isn't it, Eddie?
That's right, yes.
But it's, I mean, believe it or not, Ford deleted the key drive on the crankshaft pulley of the Ford Fiesta, and they relied on mechanics using these factory workshop tools to set up engines. So people in the aftermarket just bunged them all back together and bent valves left, right and centre. So there's some real traps with modern engines. They don't have the basic, simple things that we all learnt, like timing marks on the pulleys and timing.
Yeah, so mine's got a timing mark on the pulley, top dead centre, and then there's two marks on the cam gears. And in the service manual, it tells you where they should align.
Oh, that sounds like a good start.
Like I think about it, it's pretty logical. There's not much else that can go wrong, I don't think. But again, I'm more older engines as well, old Corollas and stuff. I don't know a heap about newer cars.
Yeah,
I think if you can, as I said earlier, I think if you can lock the camshafts together with a pair of vice grips or a little tool, or even a couple of cable ties, if I could lock them together, I would, because you lose nothing.
Yeah.
You know.
I'll just make something up to hold them.
Yeah.
And same with the high-speed with the big lever, the pulley adjustable pulley wrench. You can get enough leverage on it that you don't actually move the pulley when you undo the nut, in theory.
I think somebody like KD, they do make a tool that'll actually lock the two cam wheels together. In a belt, you only need a couple of bulldog clips, and you just clip the belt onto the cam wheels, and then they won't move. But with a chain, you know, I remember I had a Honda CRX that actually had two pins that you could drop pins into two holes to lock the camshafts. But I think the important thing is to have the motor up at the timing marks at top dead centre to start off with. That'll sort of tend to balance the load a little bit on the camshaft.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They won't move much.
No, I didn't think they would, and that's a good point about getting it top dead centre before I start.
Yeah. And make sure the keys aren't in the ignition. My dad hit the key one time when I had the head off, and the cam wedged in a Datsun, and happily ran it round a few times and dropped the chain into the timing case. So never leave the keys in the ignition.
No, I don't have an ignition in my car for starters. It's a push button. But the engine's on an engine stand and the flywheel's off, so even jamming something in the flywheel's not going to work.
Yeah, no, you'll be fine. They won't move much.
Cheers, fellas.
When in doubt, Google the internet. There's lots of good info out there.
I used to do that, and every now and again I do, but I find that most things you Google for 3 hours, if you just gone and started on doing stuff, you'd be finished.
That's true. Eddie, you were looking for some very strange part or rivet or something or another. What was that?
Oh, I was after a riv nut tool, but I need someone within 5K. So if anyone's around,
Where do you live?
Ivanhoe.
No, too far. We've got one.
Who's talking?
Oh, Hayden.
Oh, Hayden. Yeah.
We're down Cheltenham, Moorabbin.
Yeah, that's all right. I bought a bit of aero for Vicky's Exceed, and it happened to come with riv nuts to go underneath the rear clam. So
they're getting quite cheap, those.
You can get one from Bunnings for $150, King Chrome.
Yeah.
Even eBay has kits pretty cheap too. That's where I got my one. I'm at Altona, so I'm a bit too far away.
I was a bit dubious about the eBay ones. That's the only thing I was wanting.
Yeah.
No, I got one off eBay. It's fine.
Mine's fine too. It hasn't broken anything. I've gone to Bunnings to get replacement nutserts. I've used that many of them.
Okay.
What aero did you buy?
Beg pardon?
What aero did you buy?
Just underneath the rear guards behind the rear wheels. The 380 I think has like a little air scoop underneath the clam on each side. So I just bought those.
Oh, nice.
More for protection than for any, anything to help it go faster.
Under those guards gets really hammered by stones and rubber and all that sort of shit. So,
yeah, mine's got a lot of aero coming over the next sort of couple of months.
Okay,
right.
Do tell.
Oh, John Reese is making up a few bits and pieces for it. So, big skirts, big wings, big splitters, big diffusers. So yeah, it should be a very different car by the time it gets back on the racetrack.
Well, given the horsepower, you might need a bit of that, yeah.
Yeah, no, so it should be fun. Now I just need bigger tyres.
Yeah.
Vicky, I think it's the other way around. Given the aero he's got, he's going to need the horsepower to drive it through the air.
We're going to say, yeah.
Well, the engine we already know is capable of something like 600 horsepower, and it I don't know how much it got to, but it was pretty ridiculous. And it did need a big wind to help it, with a bit of downforce.
Yeah, I saw Richard's car. It was it nearly take off.
Eddie, I had one idea for you. If you can't get hold of a riv nut tool, you can do the same thing with a bolt and a nut. If you put the nut on, don't use a nylock obviously, but just put ordinary nut onto the long bolt to start with, then put the riv nut onto the bolt, put it into the hole, and then slowly tighten the nut up. It'll pull the riv nut tight, and then you unscrew the thing and riv nut set. Won't cost you anything. Certainly. Again, it's one of those things where you've only got one or two to do. You may not want to spend $150 on a tool and a bolt of the correct thread plus the nut, and you'll be able to set the riv nut and move on.
Yeah, I saw that on YouTube when I did a search. I was a bit dubious about going down that road because I'm going into fiberglass, and I just didn't want it to just rip through the fiberglass.
It has exactly the same operation as the ordinary riv nut tool. Just pulls the thing tight and spreads it. And if you're worried about the fiberglass, you need to have a backup washer on there, whether you're using a riv nut or this method I've just suggested.
So would you suggest a washer on the back side of it, would you?
If you can get to it, And if it's a correctly sized washer, not one that's got the hole in the middle's too big, because that'll give you a lot of grief. Yes, I suggest it. Spread the load, especially if it's what is it you're putting on? What is it you're putting on?
Well, just like a bit of aero scoop underneath the guard, the rear wheel, just directly behind the rear wheels, underneath the clam. They're only small little winglets, I guess you could call, underneath the car.
Can you see that, David?
Oh, Vicky's holding it. Yeah.
Why? Why are you putting that on?
To protect the underside of the clam, basically. I'm not doing it so much for the aero. I'm doing it more to protect it from all the stones and shit that the tyres, you know, throw up.
Okay.
Is that in the wheel arch, Eddie, or behind the wheel?
Behind the wheel, underneath the wheel arch, I guess, underneath the clam.
Okay. There's also rubberized paint you can get from Repco for about $20.
Oh yeah, I realise that.
Yeah.
I've actually got a stone shield under there at the moment, but I'm not. That marks pretty quickly too.
Sometimes if the loads aren't great, instead of putting metal nutserts into fiberglass, you can distribute the load quite nicely with those rubber nutserts. And I'm just stuffed if I can remember what they're called. I've got, but roll nuts, yes, that's it. And, you know, so as you do them up, they provide quite a good load around the whole hole rather than risking sort of cracking the fiberglass.
Yeah, I know what you mean exactly with those. I think I might even have a few downstairs.
Yeah, well, they're quite positive once they're done up. So, you know, that might be another option for you.
Yeah, because there's a few on the S1 like that.
There are, yes.
Okay. Gerard, you've got your hand up. Was there something else?
Yeah. Look, it's not Lotus related, but I'm sure that people are sort of interested in automotive projects. I have just, I'll say completed, and we all know that means it's not complete. 7 years in the making. I've just got my Cobra on the road. And so it was a kit car that I imported from the UK, and it's now registered as of the 17th of June. So that's a little milestone.
Well done.
Nice work. That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, it's a bit scary to drive just quietly. And of course it hasn't had terribly much driving as yet, but I'm gradually getting it sorted out. It's a Gardner Douglas from the UK, yeah. So it's got a 6-litre LS2 out of an SS Commodore and 6-speed manual. And it weighs just under 1,100 kilos, so it's a reasonably quick sort of piece of equipment.
I'm sure.
Yeah, a little bit scary to drive, particularly in the wet, I've noticed. So there was mention made about, you know, don't you drive your car often enough to sort of keep the battery charged and all that sort of stuff. And so now I've got the Lotus and that. So each of them's only getting half of those sorts of outings, and so I am having to sort of watch things like battery charge, especially during COVID.
Can't you use the Cobra as a test tow car for your trailers? You know.
Yeah, well, it doesn't actually have any chassis from the back wheels back, so a tow bar would have quite a long journey to actually get to something structural, I'm afraid. But certainly it's got enough power to tow something, but yes, I don't think it's quite designed for that purpose. One good thing about having it nearly complete, and when I say nearly, you know, there's still 100 little jobs to do. We've just, I'm reorganising my workshop now to get onto the next project, and I'm indebted to a couple of my old mates. These are guys I've known since we were all about 9 years old. And because we spend every Tuesday up here working on cars, usually a fair bit of that time's been spent on mine. And so our next project is already in the middle of the workshop. We're just trying to, get the courage to tackle it. And of course, we sort of need the COVID restrictions to allow all of us to be here. But that's a Lola T70 replica.
Oh,
So
right.
it's going to take probably a couple of years to get going. It'll be simpler in lots of ways than the Cobra. And I'm mindful of the fact that I probably really want to try and drive it before I'm 70 years old.
Is it a roadster
Is it
or
a guarded Douglas one again?
Yes.
Is it a guarded Douglas?
Yes. Yeah.
So is it the?
Have you been down to have a look at the Nolans?
No, I didn't realise that the club was going down there at the time, and I probably would have made a stronger effort to go down. But I have seen the pictures of theirs. So I'm hoping that theirs is still registered, because that'll sort of help me with getting mine on the road.
Well, their car, of course, the Gardner Douglas has never been registered because it's never been finished. But of course, their original T70 was one of the, I suspect, probably the only registered T70 Lola in Australia. And I know that all they're going to do is to go down and renew the registration and put it onto the new car.
Yes, well, I think their original one is now worth so much money that, somebody really ought to sort of resurrect it in the not too distant future.
You won't be the first person. You're not the first person to think of that, and I can assure you they won't sell it.
Oh yeah, look, and the reason I'm building a replica is because I could never own a real one. That said, it's still a reasonably expensive exercise, because when you get into the big engines and stuff like that, to find a transaxle that you can put behind it and all that sort of stuff's quite a dear exercise.
Mm.
So is it the Roadster or the fully enclosed one?
No, it's the Roadster. If you compared it with the real ones, it looks like a Mark 1 or a Mark 2. Yeah, so but it's a Spider. Yeah. Yeah, so nominally, when it is registered, it'll be a 1965 replica. But of course, it isn't exactly a replica, because it's got a tubular steel space frame rather than a monocoque aluminium body. But yeah.
If you don't say, we won't ask.
No, not at all. Yeah, I'm a bit scared of it, frankly. But at the same time, I always wanted one. So you sort of get to an age where you can afford it, and it might be too late to have it.
Reflecting back on the tools and on current projects, you would have just finished off a Cobra. This time last year, I bought a couple of old MGTCs, and I've just about finished making two into one. But it was interesting that the tools required are quite diverse, because being a British car, you would think it would be predominantly imperial measures, which it is. It's either BSF or BSW, BS Whitworth, except for the engine bolts, and all the engine bolts are metric bolts with Whitworth heads, which is just astonishing. And people say, why on earth did MG, which has been around since the 20s, make an engine which has got metric bolts but with Whitworth heads rather than metric heads? And there's always various rumours go around about Hotchkiss and so on, but nobody really knows. And all I know is that if you've got to buy an individual bolt, it can cost you $10 for a bolt, because there's very few people. There's only one manufacturer in the world. And I had to make the choice for the rest of the car. I had to make a choice for the rest of the car, whether to stick with the BSF and BSW or just go to metric for the rest of the car, which I won't say which I did, but it was interesting, because you could have lots of tools, oddball tools.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work on my. You go.
Go on, Hayden.
I've done a lot of work on my father-in-law's MGs, and yeah, it's a pain in the ass.
On the subject of tools, I had a socket set that I was given when I was 18, which was AF millimeter and Whitworth, and a few years ago it was stolen from my garage, and I had a heck of a job replacing the Whitworth sockets. I still haven't replaced it. I don't know if anybody else has had the same problem. Getting hold of Whitworth sockets now is quite difficult.
I've got
Duncan, and actually it isn't difficult. There are any number of sellers who will sell you, quality, even Star Wheeler, I think, do Whitworth spanners, but you pay a lot of money for them, but they do them.
Okay.
Do you still use them, Duncan?
Oh, yes, because I've got a TVR, and believe it or not, there's quite a number of Whitworth nuts and bolts still on it. Gradually, I think I've replaced them with metric things like the seatbelt anchor bolts and the like were all Whitworth.
No, they're not.
I've got a whole lot of old Whitworth stuff sitting in my shed and got no idea what to do with it, but it sounds like there might be a demand for it. So
yeah, maybe I should talk to you. I'd be very keen to get hold of a set of Whitworth sockets.
Because you can even get Whitworth ratchet ring spanners on eBay.
Yeah, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
They're probably the best tool invented since sliced bread.
Yeah. I reckon they're shocking things.
The ratchet ring spanners, oh mate, I can't live without them.
All right, any more questions? Any more comments? Any other feedback or ideas?
I have one other on tools.
Okay.
I reckon the best tools I've bought in the last 10 years have been battery-powered electric tools for doing all sorts of jobs around a battery-powered drill, battery-powered hammer drills, and simply undoing nuts and bolts. I don't know how I ever did without a battery-powered hand tool. They're just phenomenal. They save you hours and hours of work, and you don't trip over the bloody cords. And if you buy a decent, mine in Milwaukee, and they're good quality, the batteries last a long time. They've got phenomenal power in them. I've got a battery-powered grinder cut-off wheel with a little 1mm cut-off wheel, and I haven't used a hacksaw for, I reckon, 10 years. The battery-powered tools are just amazing. They really are.
Yeah. I just took the jump to battery-powered garden equipment. Even chainsaws for cutting small branches. I still have a petrol chainsaw for bigger stuff, but if you just want to get out and cut one or two small branches off, so much better than getting the bloody chainsaw out, filling up with fuel.
Yeah.
The batteries are amazing.
That battery grinder or cut-off wheel is a really handy thing if you need to cut a wheel clamp off.
Yeah. Or cut through a bicycle lock, which seems to be the way that most bicycles are stolen these days.
Yes, yeah, I'd say so.
The person rolls up on an old bike, they've got their helmet on, and then they start fiddling around pretending they're locking their bike. When nobody's looking, out comes the battery-powered angle grinder, and through that lock, and off they ride on the $10,000 specialised carbon road bike.
Yeah.
Actually, those multi-tools, I always looked at them and thought, oh, what a piece of junk, and saw a mate use one.
Yeah.
They're bloody unreal.
Yeah, they are.
Does anybody use infrared thermometers at all around their engines? Any comments on the usefulness of that as a tool? I just bought a Fluke one, and I've been really impressed how good it is for the price.
I've got one, but I use it for tyres more so than engine, but brake discs as well.
We used one at work, largely looking at wheel bearings and brakes of caravans.
Yeah, they're pretty good if you build a bit of a tolerance into your assumptions from the readout. It's good enough to tell if people have got COVID, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. All right, well, I think we've done pretty well. We've actually managed, oh, look at that, it's 9 o'clock. So we've had a chit chat for an hour and a half, and I think